The president yesterday signed the 2023 supplementary budget. That's like 2.1 trillion naira, signed it into law. It has been causing several controversies. I would like us to start with the concept of supplementary budget. It's a universal thing. It's not a bad idea to have a supplementary budget, but it depends on the need for it. And the supplementary budget has been largely criticized because of the items, some of the issues, that are being raised as far as some of the provisions being made for the supplementary budget. Let me have your take on the issue of supplementary budget first, the concept of supplementary budget first.
Well, I think sometimes we miss up a whole lot of things. Budgets are just mere estimates on what the nation hope to receive and expend in the course of a fiscal year. And so it's not an actual, it's an estimation. And so in the course of the year, a lot of things can happen that will make the projection not realistic. And to that extent, regimes are empowered to make provision to be able to accommodate some of these changes. Now, don't forget that in May, when the president came in, he announced the removal of subsidy. And there had been a whole lot of agitation because of the net implication of the removal of subsidy on workers. And these, of course, had forced the president to announce wage review for civil servants. And now, this was not accommodated at the time the budget for 2023 was being presented at the National Assembly. And so there will be a need for the president to look for money and see how to cushion the effect or the hardship of the removal of subsidy has brought on the workforce. So I think that is what it is. If you have looked at the budget that was signed yesterday, you will discover that 1.3 trillion of that budget is actually there to pay workers' salary. And I think that is what it is. I don't think any reasonable person will actually criticize what is being done because we cannot feel the pain. And don't also forget that, of course, the projections were being made also. We have to allow the naira to float against the dollar. And that also had brought about some increase in prices. And so some of the capital projects that, of course, you have priced in the course of the year also had to be varied. And all these things are required. That's why you saw about 300 something billion that's set aside for some critical infrastructure. So all these things put together, I don't think there's anything strange in the supplementary budget that was signed yesterday, but that, of course, the government have to keep running. Wages have to be paid to the civil servants who are delivering value to the society at large, except that we have to say, okay, we have to wait till 2024, which means some people may not take November, December salary, and that will not be good for the nation. I think that's what it is for supplementary budget. There is nothing strange, there's nothing bad about having a supplementary budget. It's just to say that you had a projection, and based on the reality on the ground, you are not able to meet your expectations, so you have to vary your projection.
All right, let's look at the breakdown of the 2023 budget. You will now understand where the controversy is coming from. The first one is the 5 billion allocated for presidential yacht. That's been controversial. A lot of mixed reactions have trailed that. There's this argument that, having that kind of provision at this time shows a form of insensitivity on the part of the presidency, that you have to take luxury over the welfare of Nigerians. There's this other side where the House committee is also saying they're going to investigate. And one would have expected that the House committee will have investigated in the first place. There's supposed to be an appropriation for this thing, which the House committee also have investigated first before it's been approved. But now the budget is approved. The interesting thing about this was the provision, the request was made by former administration, under the former president, Buhari. But now the approval is being done. Now, one would have expected that the House Committee will have done due diligence. Now, there's this other side where the Navy is also saying is a necessity to maintain, the security items for the presidency. And so it's bringing a lot of controversy that Nigerians don't even understand if you're placing the welfare of Nigerians above such a project that seems to be insensitive. I understand.
I think there are two different things here. We have the 2024 budget projection, which is on the one hand, and we also have the supplementary budget on the other hand. And I don't think the yacht is on the supplementary budget. And I think this is what many people really need to know. And when they say presidency is not one person. And I think this must be very clear to us as Nigerians. You see, there are so many authorities that report to the president. And in terms of relating with the president, they also have basic requirements that are needed. This is not a new item or something that is new to the budgetary process. That, of course, they call it presidential year, just as you have also Air Force One, which is a primary plane that every president in the world flies. So you have Air Force One, you also have a yacht in the event that the president will want to actually look at the oil facilities or move to look at the entire environment. Don't also forget that this regime also has prioritized the blue economy, which is going to be all around water. And I'm not sure that people are expecting that the president is going to be driving canoe in the middle of the ocean if there's a need for it. So I think we just need to be very, very responsible when we criticize. Sometimes when we hear the volume of money, we look at it as very big. I looked at it when they say 5 billion. It sounds big, but when you put it vis-a-vis the major currencies of the world, whether dollar or pound, euro, you see it's a small fraction. And that is what it is. And I don't think that's a big problem we have as a nation. What we have as a nation is that we should necessarily be looking at how to bake a bigger cake, which is what the president is focused on. How do we increase the revenue base for this nation so that we can build basic and critical infrastructure that will drive national growth and development? So I think that for me is a take. That you buy a yacht that the Navy is going to use along president, I don't see it as anything that is extraordinary or extravagant, so to speak. But what is important is to see that are we moving in the right direction? Even Peter Obi hailed the 1.3 trillion yesterday that was signed for labor because it was good for him, even though he said they are the official opposition to the government. So somehow we see that there's some convergence, that there are some things that are necessary and they have to be done, whether we like it or not. You see, the way Nigerians look at government is to say sensitivity, oh, there's poverty in the land. I don't think it's the business of government to actually determine how we eat. That's not the government's business.
But it's also in position
government's
to provide
business is to ensure that they provide an enabling ground. When you say government is not sensitive because there's a hunger in the land, is it the role of government to be giving individual money to feed? No, that's not a duty of government. Now, how do we increase our productivity? I keep making this analogy everywhere in the world. The last time somebody asked me that we just corn, that when you throw a piece of corn on the ground, anywhere in Nigeria, the thing will grow without watering, without fertilizer. We cannot even produce corn as a people. That does not require any government incentive to plant corn that we can sell both locally and abroad. As we speak, Nigeria import corn for feed, for animals. So why do you have a market and people don't want to work? And I think this is what people should be speaking to. The level of productivity in Nigeria as we speak is at its lowest ebb. People are making ungodly excuses why they cannot work. And this is the real truth. People say, oh, there's insecurity. It's not also all states that have insecurity. Even the state with insecurity, people are still farming. I saw a lieutenant colonel about 2 weeks ago, and he was giving me a data on his experiment in Borno State while he was commanding a garrison there. And he said he decided to lead by example, to go into farming in that region. And he said in 2021, he had about 79 bags of beans produced in Basa local government in Borno State. And he said this last year, 2022, he produced 300 bags of beans in the same area. And he said a whole lot of people in Basa had come back to their community. They are all producing beans. And he's having good testimony of people who are farming and they are making money. And I think this is what we should do. We should not hide under the guise that, oh, there is trouble in the land and therefore we cannot do what we are reasonably supposed to be doing. This is the real conversation. And this is where Nigerians should hang it. Not that, you see, we have opportunities, but we are not leveraging it. The small things that we can do for ourselves, we cannot do. Ukraine is fighting war. They are still selling wheat up to today. They have not stopped wheat production. We that is not fighting any war, we cannot go to farm because of insecurity. This for me is a lame argument, and it's not something that we should glorify.
The argument could also be valid if you, like you said, that which is universally known that government should provide the enabling environment. But what if the enabling environment is harsh or is not there? For instance, you want to start a business, the power supply, you have to make provisions.
We don't need power supply to plant corn. But do we need power to plant corn? For someone who wants to go into small businesses. Leave small business. Do we need? No. You see, what people talk about is the areas where you have comparative cost advantage. Take for example, we need to eat first. Food security. We don't need to import rice. Custom, about 3 days ago, impounded loads of rice that are coming into Nigeria because we cannot farm rice. We don't need light to farm rice, for God's sake. We're only looking for excuses out of our, I don't know how to put it. We must look for one excuse to say, oh, this is why government has not done well. This is why we are not living well. We must leave government out of some of our crises. We don't need light to plant rice.
But to do mechanized farming, you need electricity because of the equipment that are involved. And the bulk of farmers in Nigeria, they are, small-scale farmers who are doing that to provide, food for their families. So it's a combination of several factors, but I want us to focus on, the 2023 supplementary budget, which is the issue of the presidential year, talking about the insensitivity. I think the challenge here is flow of information. When you don't have the right information, people will make assumptions, and sometimes assumptions can be stronger than the truth when people are to provide the right explanation and information don't provide. A good example is the House Committee on Navy, who are not even privy to this, information. They are not even providing now look at the way it's turning around. It's been approved now. The House Committee says now they will now have to investigate. Someone who should be in custody of that information is not in position to even enlighten Nigeria. Like the explanation you provided about the need for the presidential year. Somebody should have been in position like the House Committee on Navy or, to provide proper explanation and breakdown on why this thing is a necessity. But for those who are to be, in position to provide
Femi, there is a whole lot of grand attempt by some people to disinform and misinform the public. And I think this is it. You see, we always look for a cheap way to steal the show. And this is not good for our reputation and our image. And I think those who have the responsibility of being in power, especially the National Assembly, they should not be grandstanding. We should be able to see substance about what they are talking about before they throw it to the media and make it like a huge hue and cry out of it. And this for me is just simply crying for significance and relevance. What is important is that we have a presidential system of government where the legislatures, who are principally the representatives of the people, making law for the good governance of the state, have that responsibility to be able to query any assumption that comes from the executive. But meanwhile, we should be able to distinguish the presidency from the person of the president.
All right. Let's talk about some of other provisions in the supplementary budget. You have over 600 billion for security, 5.5 billion for student loans, about 660 billion wage awards for civil servants to augment the high cost of living. These are the bulk of what constitutes the supplementary budget. All right, let's move to the next story, which has to do with the Naira, which is where I think this your argument also will be valid. The presidency has revealed, plan to actively developing policies aimed at strengthening the Nigerian currency. The special advisor to the president on economic matters, Dr. Tokwe Fashura, who recently said that the recent gradual appreciation of the Naira and suggested that the trend is likely to continue due to the implementation of government policies. Are you optimistic that, the gradual strengthening of the Naira is going to continue as insinuated by Tokwe Fashura?
Well, I for one, really do not subscribe to this idea of strengthening currency. Except that as a people, we have lived too much of fake lives. And I think that's a real issue. Our economy is not driven by dollar. Our economy is driven by Naira. And what we should be doing as a people is not to be looking at the Naira against the dollar. Why has this become very important for us as a nation? It's important because we are not productive. That's the only single reason. Because everything you need here, including this one that I'm wearing, we have to import it because we cannot make it here.
And so foreign currency will have influence on the economy.
Should we live like that? Is the question. Should we be living like that? Small countries yesterday, like Bangladesh, are doing excellently well. Look at Turkey. For example, Turkey don't buy suit from Italy. They make their suits and they are selling across the globe. Why should we have to go to import Turkey's suit, for God's sake? This is the challenge, and this is where we really need to have the conversation. Let Naira float. What is important for me is that you have it as a means of exchange. Isn't that what it is? Currencies are. And one of the things that government can actually do is to see how we can also tie our wages to the price index, which many nations have done successfully. So there's no this idea of trying to increase salary from time to time will naturally just die. That as the price index increases, the wages of the people also increases. And now this will make a whole lot of sense that, yes, you used to buy a bag of rice at 30,000, but a bag of rice is now 57,000. Automatically, more Naira is added to your hand so that you can afford a bag of rice. And I think that solves the problem. Because we are not spending dollar here. So government business should not look at, because we have over-glorified the use of dollars. I see people who need dollars as huge luxury, most of it. Especially those who need dollars to send children to school abroad, those who need dollars to do medication abroad. That should not be the priority of government. The priority of government is to develop a basic infrastructure here, make sure our health system is working, make sure our educational system is working, and then the pressure on the naira to dollar will reduce. Now, ensure also that basic items that we can produce locally should not be imported. And even where they are going to be imported, government really should also see how to enter into partnerships with some of these corporations to produce it here. So rather than go to China to go import it from China, China set up factories here to produce those goods and items. We can list them out. Those ones that our natural resources can support. So we don't need to be traveling every day looking for dollar to go do business outside. Then we can actually create an economy here that is productive, that will be beneficial to everybody, create job for people. Because the more importation you do, the more job you export. That's what the problem is. So we are crying about unemployment at one breath, and on the other breath, we are talking about dollar to go bring goods from outside. For every single dollar you take out from this economy, you have gone giving job to some people in China, giving job to some people in Turkey, giving job to some people in Bangladesh, and that should not be the norm.
The Nigeria economy is import-driven, and as long as it's import-driven, you know, you can't.
It's not a good thing.
You can't rely on the influence. No, as we speak now, I'm talking about the reality now. It's import-driven, and as long as it's import-driven, you can't rule out the influence of foreign currency like dollars and the rest. You know, the way it is, if the dollar sneezes now, the naira is in trouble, because that's the reality. Like you said,
what I'm saying is that we should not be import. There should be balance of trade. Yeah, nobody is saying we cannot buy things abroad, but you see, we should be able to leverage on the things that we can produce locally.
Yeah, I agree with you.
We can enter into agreements with companies, multinationals, give them incentive. That rather than we go in there to go and produce it, they can be producing it here, creating the economy here, and also creating job for our people.
You remember certain, you know, like 41 items were banned some years ago.
They were not banned, they were just forbidden from dollar.
Yeah, now, but the restriction has been lifted, which means something as little as toothpick will have to be imported again, you know, which is something that can be produced locally. This is part of what we're talking about when we look at...
No. I think we should also set it in context. What government has done, you know, before now...
was to encourage local production.
No. Yeah, before now, CBN was subsidizing foreign exchange.
Yeah, for those items.
For almost all the items that were being shipped, even medical, education, and a whole lot of it. So what the CBN was doing was to see that you can afford the dollar in case you need it. And government identified these items and said, well, we cannot subsidize this item. If you want to import it, go and look for your dollar. Now we are the regime that where government is saying, we don't want to subsidize any item at all. And so if we are not subsidizing any item at all, now what is the use of having those 41 items on the list? Because they are all in the same group now. Everybody go out to source his dollar, just like those people were doing. It's not like they were not bringing those products into the country. They were bringing it, but government was not giving them dollar at official rate to import such product. But now that government is not giving anybody official rate, based on what we are told, then of course saying or keeping 41 items on a list will just be amounting to some futility.
Still on the economy, the next story will interest you. The House of Representatives Committee on Small and Medium Enterprises has emphasized the role of SMEs in the Nigerian economy and emphasized the need to strengthen these enterprises to boost our employment opportunities. You know, even if you look at the best economies in the world, that of China, that of UK, you know that it thrives on SMEs, and it's very critical because these are the critical sectors that drive, you know, growth and development. Talk to us about your take on SMEs in Nigeria. The House of Reps Committee are saying there's a need to emphasize the ROI and then, empower that sector to create more employment?
Well, whether in Nigeria or elsewhere globally, SME contributes over 60% to the GDP of any nation, including Nigeria, even as we speak. The statistics are not different. But you see, one of the issues that we have with that sector is the fact that a whole lot need to be done around the SME in the area of education, financial education. And I think that is the most important thing to be done, such that some people realize the differences between capital and profit. You see, people talk about loans that are given to SMEs. Why is not sustainable? Because the rate of default is also very high. So that increases the risk for the banks. And so, who bears that risk is a bank. So they know that if we give out 10 loans, 6 are likely to become bad loans because repayment is not going to be as simple. So they have to charge very high interest to be able to close that gap. That's what's happening. And I feel this is happening because many of the operators within that sector really do not have sufficient financial education or knowledge. And you see somebody make sales, and then the next thing he go and buy a Prado Jeep, eating deep into the business. You call it small packaging. And then, of course, you are not able to repay your loan. Then the business itself goes down. You see, this is where we need real critical intervention. Of course, the president also had made some money available to some of SMEs to deliberately grow that sector. But I don't think it's just throwing money at SMEs alone. They need to also train and retrain, provide avenue for prudence, responsible use of capital and profit will go a long way in actually boosting that sector. But I think the biggest problem that SMEs face in Nigeria is access to loan facilities, which they may not have, or raising capital to support their operations. But again, there's also the government dimension, which is what, of course, where the National Assembly will also need to support the effort of Mr. President, who set up the Oyedele committee to review the multiple taxations, which are also very, very terrible in terms of bringing SME down. I give you one example. I started a small factory some time ago, and in that factory, I had not even started operation. The local government in the neighborhood was already troubling me to come and pay tax. SME would not even survive. And I remember in trying to obtain a CFO for the parcel of land I had, I was looking for 12 million to fund the project, and the state government was asking me for 13 million for a CFO for the same piece of land, because I needed the land to be able to take facility. And the facility I needed was 12 million. But for me to certify the land, I was going to pay government 30 million. Now, these are issues that, of course, confronts SMEs, that, of course, the National Assembly, through very proactive legislation, we should be able to handle and ensure that these multiple taxation that are dragging down the progress or the will of progress of SME are removed. And if it is done, of course, we have much people paying tax, there will be much money available to build critical infrastructure, and the nation itself will benefit greatly.